Hey, Pastor Andrew here with our Thursday devotional. I'm sitting here at my table in my dining room and I'm prepared for this time that we're going to have together right now. Thursday is our day today, and on Holy Thursday there's a whole lot of things that happen, and it's such a packed day, such a full day. And so as we're on the 6th episode, we're going to move through what Holy Thursday actually happens on that day, and some of the things that take place, on the key points. And so we're going to move through quite a bit here in just a few minutes. But this time, this significance of this day is quite crucial to Jesus's next steps as he's about to head to the cross, as he's being betrayed by Judas. There's a whole lot that just happens on this day. And so as we look today, we find that this day sort of revolves around the Last Supper. And that's sort of where the story picks up here, is around the Last Supper and around Jesus and the disciples as they are celebrating this feast of Passover, as they're celebrating this time as we know it as Easter. And so we read in Matthew chapter 26, verse 26, that Jesus said to them while they were eating, he took bread, he broke it, and he gave it to each disciple, and he said, "I have some bread here. I'm actually going to take communion, and feel free to join me in this." And it says, "Take, eat, this is my body." The bread represents his body. And then he took the cup and he gave thanks, and then he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you, for this is my blood of the new covenant, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. But I say to you, I will not drink of this fruit of the vine from now until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." We'll drink together. And then from here they sing a song. And they leave and they go out to the Mount of Olives. And while they are at the Mount of Olives, Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane, and there's this incredible scene here in the garden where while Jesus is in the garden, he goes with his disciples. And it says that he tells them in verse 36, he says, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." And it says that he took the two sons of Zebedee with him and Peter, when he began to be sorrowful and deeply distressed. And when then he looked at them and he said to them, "My soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay here and watch with me." And then he goes a little bit further and he prays. And his prayer is so beautiful. In verse 39, he says, "Oh my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." See, what we see happening here is Jesus is agonizing over what he has to do, because what he has to do is so burdensome. It's such a heavy weight that is on him. And he asks his Father, he says, "If there's any way we can do this another way, let's do it." But he says, and I love this, he says, "Nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done." You know, there are times where you and I are going to struggle with what God's will for our lives is. There's times where we're going to feel the weight and the burden of what God has put in. And I don't know if you've ever felt that before. Personally, that's one of the reasons why I pursued ministry, was because I had a weight, a burden that God had given to me for ministry. And that was one of the reasons I went. So I understood, and there were aspects of me that didn't want to do it. And there were aspects of me that said, "God, no, if there's another way, if there's something else I can do, then I'd rather do that." But because I love the Lord, and I'm glad I've done it, I love ministry, but because I love the Lord, I said what Jesus said, "Not my will, but your will be done." And each of us has to get to the point where it's not just about the sacraments, of doing the things that we normally do. The communion, the fellowship, the going to church, but a submitted life that says, God, I know this is what I want, but this is what you want, and because it's what you want, that's what I'm gonna do. I want to follow your will for my life. Now, the disciples, we see, couldn't actually stay awake with Jesus. And this chapter actually goes all the way down to verse 75. But we see Jesus here. He's in the garden. He's so overwhelmed. The Bible says that blood begins to ooze out of his pores, that he begins to sweat blood, that the blood begins to drip from him because he's under so much stress. And then in verse 45, when they are coming to arrest Jesus, he's been betrayed by Judas. It says, are you still sleeping and resting? Behold, the hour is at hand where the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hand of sinners. Rise, let us go. See, my betrayer is at hand. Judas comes and he kisses Jesus and he betrays Jesus. And everything Jesus prophesied and tells them and has told them is now beginning to unfold and happen. And from here, Jesus is taken to Caiaphas' house, where, and I've actually been there, I've actually seen it. It's a place actually of just very heavy burden. When you go in there, you almost can't help but weep to think that Jesus was locked in that place. And it's just such a heavy burden to imagine what Jesus is going through here. In the garden, before they get to Caiaphas' house, we see where Peter, this is where he draws a sword and he cuts off a soldier's ear, and Jesus heals the man's ear back. And it's because it comes back to this whole narrative of they expected Jesus to be a warrior, but instead we find Jesus healing the wounded and the sick and those who sought to destroy him. He instead was there to bring healing to them. I'm sitting here thinking about this, and I'll be honest, I'm fighting by the tears right now to think about how amazing our God is, that he would love us, that even though we killed him, he still showed his great love towards us. Peter, even on this same day, denies Jesus. And I want to challenge you to not be too hard on Peter, because you and I have on a regular basis done our own denials of Jesus. No, maybe it wasn't a flat out, I don't know this man, but there have been opportunities and times in our lives where we could have let the light of Christ shine, but instead we shied away because we were afraid of what people would say or think if we let our light shine, if we let the light of Christ shine in people's lives, through our lives into people's lives. And so, don't be too hard on Peter, because you and I have denied Jesus many times. But I thank God that he's a God of grace who restores us in love, and that he still went to the cross and died for Peter's sin, even though Peter denied him, and that he still went to the cross and died for our sin, your sin and my sin, even though we have denied him. You see, I want to challenge you today, because what we see happen next in Matthew chapter 27 is when the morning comes, and we'll talk about this tomorrow, when the morning comes, Jesus goes on trial and he gets led to the cross. Although that's what we think, or how we like to think about it. But Jesus wasn't led by the cross by people. He was led to the cross. He was led to Golgotha by the Spirit of God, because no man takes his life from him. Instead, he lays it down. He laid it down for you and for me. And that is why we celebrate these sacraments. That's why we remember the body that was given and broken for us. That's why we remember the blood that was shed for us for the remission of sins. And that's why on Thursday, that's why when Jesus does the Last Supper with his disciples, he reminds them through these simple elements what's about to happen. I want to challenge you to, first of all, read Matthew chapter 26 from the beginning to the end. But also I want to challenge you that when, as you're reading it, to take communion. If all you've got in your house is water, then use the water. But get some bread, get something to drink, and use that as communion. As you read through it, as you read the words, just as I just did, and do that. But the other thing I want to challenge you to do today is this. I want to challenge you to do what Jesus did in the garden. To take time and get alone and be with the Father in prayer. Because one of the most powerful things that God has given to us as believers is prayer. So I want to challenge you today. Pray without ceasing, and pray in the presence of God. I love you. I'll see you tomorrow for our next devotional. God bless you.